The guy who took your 10 grand and earned 10% on it every year for 60 years will give you back 3 million after 60 years. Not bad, right?
Yeah.
10 grand, 10,000 to 3 million, right? The Warren Buffett, who can invest it at 20%, will give you back 563 million.
Hi guys, welcome to Bigger Than the Hustle podcast, where I bring you real conversations with entrepreneurs on how they live their lives outside their business. We deep dive into the energies, the disciplines, the habits, the motivations, and the mindsets which make them successful in their life, which now turns them to be successful in their business. Now, today I've got a guest with me, a friend of mine from our children's school, actually. Both my son and his daughter go to the same school, and we've sort of kicked it off since then. So a few years we've been in touch. We've done lots of things outside of school as well, and we've set up little projects for our kids to be a part of, like the Lego project, etc. And I've always been admired Parmdeep with the way he operates his life and the way he thinks. So I wanted to get him on today to have a conversation so we can share sort of his little bit of his insight and his knowledge with you. So hi Parmdeep.
Hi Bhavik, thanks for having me on.
No, not at all. So if you can just introduce yourself to the viewers and the listeners, and a short bio into you, and then we can go into the conversation.
Sure, I'm Parmdeep Vadesha. I'm 39 years old. I'm married. I have 2 kids, and I live in Leicester.
Perfect. Now, I know you sort of have your, in terms of your journey, as in terms of your professional journey, you've been in the property game, because I know a lot of people have talked to you about being in property, whether it be development, whether it be buying and selling and things like that. And one of my friends who's been on the podcast for Barrett, he rents a little bit of space from you in your office as well for his studio and stuff. So it's I know you've been a long time an entrepreneur and been on your own path. So if anyone is looking to sort of step onto their own path, what kind of advice would you give them? Because there are a lot of younger people that listen, a lot of people that are in that sort of fear and stress at the moment, obviously the situation we're in right now. So what advice would you give them to sort of like step out of their fear and step into the known of entrepreneurship?
I think it's really difficult for me to give kind of a generalist advice to everybody as to what they should do in terms of going out on their own, because everybody's situations are different depending on where you're coming from. I mean, the situations you would take as a family man with presumably a mortgage and bills to pay, you can take different levels of risks as someone who's maybe when I started 21 years old, very little commitments, working nights at Walker's Crisps, and I can pretty much have my day free to do what I want. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would say is the odds of succeeding in business on your own is very slim. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but you should recognize that there's nothing wrong with having a good stable job. Just to kind of give you some stability there to cover the bills. I mean, even in my line of work, if you want to borrow money, it's much harder to do if you don't have any other income. You go to a bank and say, I've got a job earning £20,000, that will give you much more capacity to grow your business than if you had nothing. So I would suggest, go and find a job where you work with and for people that you really admire. I mean, that's what I'd go out and do first before you go out and work on your own if you're young. And that's one thing I didn't do, actually. I graduated from university. I just did night work to kind of get some money in to pay the bills, and then I just went on my own. But then I didn't have that kind of corporate experience that I admire in people now in my business. I meet people who worked in 10 years in banking or accountancy or law or something like that, and they've just got a whole different world of experience to me, and then that gives them an advantage. So I would say, go out into the world, go and try and work for the best company that you can find, the people that you admire, people who are honest, they've got integrity, they're great business people, and learn from them before you go out and start on your own. That's what I would advise people to do.
Yeah, and I think, like you said there, a lot of people have started, their own journey, especially their own business. I think they started first as like a side hustle, doing something on the side. Maybe they have a full-time job and want to sort of look into certain things before deciding. A lot of experience comes from that. So like, for example, I set up my business quite early on, just like you. And I had no real formal experience in sort of home technology, apart from my dad used to have a business in home technology. So I had experience through that. So obviously our parents' journeys can help us if they've been entrepreneurs and things like that. Or likewise, if you've been in an industry. So a lot of the guests I've had on have been in, say, like banking, or they've been in certain industries, which then give them the knowledge that they then say, actually, I could do this on my own with the knowledge I have. I just don't like the structure that was based in. So I'm going to create my own structure. So that's a great way. And obviously, by having work and earning a bit of money, you have a little bit of financial support. So therefore, when you do set out, you don't set out and panic because there's no money coming. Because there will be times, especially at the start, when things are not easy. And by having that little bit of push and bit of investment in yourself, you've got, space to actually just tread the path comfortably, and things sort of happen, right? Okay, so now sort of moving out of the professional side of things and into a little bit more about mindset. Now, since I've known you for the last few years, you're an incredibly organized person. The way you conduct yourself and the way you conduct your life, you're very organized, you're very systematic, and the way you think is very organized. Where do you think that comes from? And if someone else wants to create that within themselves, what do you think they should be doing?
I wasn't always like that.
Okay. But since I've known you, you have. So.
yeah. People are really surprised when I tell them what I was like as a kid, actually. I was a bit of a tearaway as a kid. I mean, I was just bored at school. I was the guy always being told off for speaking. I remember I did further maths at college, and I remember the lecturer, our teacher. He was quite a prominent lecturer at Leicester University. He used to come in and teach us, and he said to me, "You're going to be the first person in 30 years I've ever moved." for talking too much, and 2 weeks later I hadn't been moved to the front. So, I was just a restless kid, and I went. One of my best friends at school, his big brother ended up banged up abroad and stuff like that. It was quite a fun childhood. So I went into business. Not really having those skills in terms of organizational and management or anything like that, because I just literally fell into what I was doing. Mm-hmm. In terms of, I suppose you get organized because you have to be. I mean, it's not that difficult. It's you've got a business to run, you've got certain commitments, you've made promises to others, you've got customers. I think you just have that. In my case, it's just something I had to learn to do. I mean, there's great books like I do have it here somewhere. Maybe I'll send you the link, but it's called Getting Things Done. Mm-hmm. I forgotten the author, but it's a very good. Actually, I did read that book a while back. Yeah, that gave me some good advice in terms of just organising your day and paperwork. And for example, I run a paperless office. All of my stuff's on Google Drive. I use Google Calendar a lot, so I can check my phone. I can see what's going on. I think it just gives me a certain amount of kind of reassurance. The night before, I can look at what's going to happen the next day. I can look 2 weeks ahead and just see what I need to plan. It's not. I wouldn't say it's a particular. I'd say it's quite a basic skill. I'm sure you have the same thing. It's like a lot of business is actually mastering the basics. Yeah. It's not clever. It's not hard to figure out, put stuff into a calendar. It's just getting off your ass and doing it, and then just following it.
And I think, when you said about using Google Calendar, using Google Drive, these are, technologies that have come into our lives. And I think they've helped us become more organized when there's so much information being thrown at us. There's so much more we do as people, that having those little tools. So like you said, Google Calendar, without Google Calendar, I think certain things just won't get done. The way I think is I'll put something in there, and then if I have to follow it up, I'll just shift it to 2 days later, so I know, okay, that's due. I know it's a real simple thing, and you probably do something similar, but I've talked to other people, and they're like, wow, that's really interesting. I'm like, that's basic. If you don't have that, if I did store everything here, which I know a lot of people do, it can be chaotic. You can get up in the morning and be dragged about left, right, and center because you don't actually have any structure to your day. And things like those tools, and again, Google Drive, you can access all the information wherever you are. So even if you're not at home, you're not in the office, you can access it. So these are, tools that if you don't know much about or you don't use, I think it's a great idea to start using them or to learn about them to see how you can implement it, not just in business, but in life as well. There's so many things that, because our phone is always on us, right? We can use that, and anytime we think of something, it might be, in the library, in the car, waiting in a line somewhere, and you think, oh, I have to remember to do that. Literally put it on your calendar and it's done. You don't have to keep it in your head, right? And I think it gives you a bit of sanity and a bit of, so this stress doesn't come out of you when you're trying to do lots of things at once, right?
Yeah, I think you make a very good point. I think also technology has its disadvantages as well. And I see people, constantly being distracted by their phone and things. And I've turned off every notification on my phone, including messages and all of that. So I never get distracted by my phone. I use it as a tool to enable me rather than something that controls me in the sense of just distractions and all the rest of it. I think self-discipline is very important. And I think that comes from, for me anyway, it comes from doing something that I actually enjoy and I believe in. And if you, for me, my work is, I want to be productive. I want to achieve, and I want to have free time, and I don't want to kind of be messed around, being disorganized and all the rest of it. So that's why I organize things in that way. But I think you've got to have that self-discipline in the first place,
Yeah. And especially if you're treading your own path, I think it's so important, especially if you are the main, linchpin of the organization of the business, and you if you have staff, if you have just yourself, whatever it is, whichever way you organize it, there are so many things that are relying on you to make sure you operate well. And if you operate well, then everything around you operates well as well. And if there's other people identifying with you, I think they can identify with the way you look at yourself and organize yourself. And I suppose it's your own branding, isn't it? It's how you come out in the world and how you're perceived and seen, especially in a professional scenario, that identifies that I would like to work with this person or I don't want to work with this person. And that could be, especially in your line of business where you deal with people a lot, that's almost like a make or break, isn't it? If they don't like you, then generally they're not going to like anything you do. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and it's an advantage because most other people are so badly organized and just poor at the basic stuff. If you could just get those few things right, you'll really stand out.
Yeah. So now, moving away from professional, if we look talk about kids. Now, I know, we've met because of school. Both of our children go to the same school, which is down the road from me. Now, before you sort of ventured into the path of parenting, how do you think your life was before and after in terms of the way you operate as a human being a dad and before you were a dad?
Before I became a dad, I've always loved to teach. So one of my first businesses was I began a publishing business in 2003, and I wrote a book. I didn't want to be a published author. It wasn't like I had these ambitions to become the next J.K. Rowling or anything. In fact, I wrote it because I was on lots of forums at the time, just chatting away with people. I figured out some cool stuff that worked, using technology. So in my space, this is advice to young people, what I managed to do was use new technologies, but on an old business. So the old business was property investing. The new technology was Google AdWords and Yahoo advertising, and it's all kind of changed now. But at that time, Google, Yahoo, there was a few others. And so I was able to use that advertising medium to find people who needed to sell their assets, their properties, and they were willing to sell them cheap for whatever reason. And then there were these old school people who didn't have that same medium. So I was able to kind of, figure that out. And people were asking me, how did you do that? So I wrote a book about it. That book became a bit of a bestseller in that little niche I had, sold about 4,000 copies, which led on to lots of other things. So, sorry, what was my point there? How did we get onto the writing book?
So, how your life was before, obviously, you came.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, so I love to teach, yes. So, from the book, I went to a writing workshop, running workshops and things. And then about 2012, 2013, we decided to have a family. And I then calmed down the book and publishing side, which was great fun. But it gave me that kind of outlet for my teaching. Instincts, and I just transferred that to my children. So now I spend a lot of time, I love teaching them new things, and same with the Lego group that we were part of. For me, that was just kind of so much fun. It was my first experience working with children, and my first and probably my last. I loved it, and I loved it, and I appreciate now what teachers have to do, because I was given five or six of the brightest children with very determined parents and all of that. So it was great fun. It was a joy. I don't know how I would have managed with 30 children where 10 of them just don't want to be there, or they have completely different, requirements.
Yeah.
I can't do that, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah. So for me, that's what kind of changes in my life was rather than teaching other people my investment business type of stuff, it transferred to my children.
And I think with the schooling situation and, whatever your views are on education and the way the system is, there's so much that they're taught within school in terms of maybe, personal relationships, interactions, how they, communicate with boys and girls, etc. But there's so much they aren't. And there's so many things that we as parents hopefully can, set a path out for them that isn't covered by the schooling system, because I know there's a lot of flaws within the schooling system, this need to memorize and just do a test and things like that. It doesn't identify any success in anyone. It just knows you're good at memorizing something, right? So if all of it is going to be based on just a grade that happens at the end of 5 years or 8 years, etc., I think that's a failure in my eyes. What I would say is if my kids do well within a schooling environment, well, it doesn't have to be top. It just means that you've enjoyed it and you've got something out of it, and you've interacted and you've met a great set of people which you can carry on life with. But then there are other skills, which are the softer skills, which you've learned at home in terms of, communication, values, your beliefs, and your self-confidence in yourself to go on and do whatever you want and shine your light in the world in whichever way you can shine your light. I think that is where the balance of schooling is. I know a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on schooling to say, to have the top grade, to have top grades and be in the best school, etc. And I get that. I'm not on the journey, and I don't identify with that. I identify more with making my kids more whole people, more round people, so that they can, step out into the world and feel comfortable as opposed to feel alien. What's your views on stuff like that?
Yeah, I just kind of, very similar. I mean, I just kind of sat down and looked around. I mean, if you just kind of just step away from that, from just look around in your life and look at the people who've been successful. They're not just the people who've got straight A's in school. And the worst performers aren't just the people who've got the worst grades in school. I look around and see that the people who succeed are people who can get on with other people. I mean, that was people who can lead. Leadership is a very rare quality. It's a very valued, highly valued, rare quality in corporate life and in business life. People who can get other people to do things. So I mean, if you're the kind of person who can walk into a room and just get on with people, you're not going to struggle in life. There's always going to be a job for you somewhere, right? No, I just kind of sat there and thought there'll be plenty of like really nerdy straight A students. There'll be loads of those about because India's pumping them out by the millions. So is China. So is every kind of well-run country. But not every place is pumping out people who can lead others and like I said, get on with others. So I decided that for me, for my children, that getting great grades is a given, is a baseline. That's just yes, I'm with you. It shouldn't matter, but it does matter. So when they're going for jobs and things, people will look at their grades. So that's. I say to my children, I expect you to get great grades, but that's not everything. So from there, I build upon the other things that you talked about. So trying to give them skills in terms of, leadership, especially getting them around different kinds of children, putting them in environments that makes them very uncomfortable. We went on a camping holiday last year. They learned to build a canoe and get onto a river in Hereford that was torrential rain. They kind of had to figure that out and put a tent up and barbecue their food and that kind of stuff. But for me, that's a lot more valuable than taking them to Disneyland.
Yeah, and those kind of skills, like you said, first of all, not just what they learn, but the times they remembered spending time together, right? Spending time with you, spending time with mom and dad, and these are the things we did. I remember I went on a course once, and the guy that was running the course said, "Can you write down something you can remember from your childhood?" And everyone, there's about 30 people in the room, they all wrote down a memory or something. And then everyone spoke out what it was. And he goes, "Did you realize that everyone wrote about a time you spent with someone or a time you spent doing something, as opposed to someone bought me a red car or someone bought me a blue bike or whatever it was, rather than it being things that were bought for you, as the experiences you had and who they were with and what that shaped you as a person and how you are today." And therefore, going forward with that, as parents, if we can create those experiences and create those opportunities where they look back and say, because of those moments, I can think in this way, or I can be this way, or I believe I am enough because of that, I think that's where our job more or less allows them to get, gives them the foundation to then have a great life from there. Because they're going to have to make their mistakes. They're going to have to fall down. They're going to have to pick up, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't want to cushion them so much in that way. They'll need to go out and they'll just need to work shit out by themselves. Do you know what I mean? Like we had to. I was similar to you when we were growing up. I got told off all the time for talking, and my dad would say, "You do your work, but you talk too much. Why do you keep talking? Just stop talking, you interrupt it." I said, "Dad, but I'm doing the work. I'm getting the marks. It's not like that. It's just I'm bored." And my dad never got that, because in his head it was like, you're just interrupting and just go away. And for me now, if like, for example, Kalen, he's very similar to the way I was. And he gets very bored very quickly and he wants to move on to lots of things. And I get it. So I'm like, that's come from me and I understand. But it's trying to keep the balance, isn't it? Saying, actually, you do need to focus and concentrate on that. But I get it. Let's try some other things as well. So, and being homeschooling is a bit of a challenge as well. As you probably know, right?
I mean, I think you guys are doing a great job. I've taught Kalen, and I think he's a great student.
You can see he's a bit of his head's all over, right? He sees lots of other things at the same time, right?
Yeah, I saw myself in him.
Yeah. Exactly. So, moving in other aspects of your life, what skills do you think you still need to master, learn, or grow to become a better version of yourself?
So my work involves being a realist. Not seeing the world how I'd like to see it, but seeing it as it is and working with that. Mm-hmm. So when I'm making an investment, it's purely, you could boil it down to a spreadsheet in many cases. It doesn't mean the spreadsheet's right. I mean, if it gives a number, doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. But it's looking at the world with trying to understand your natural biases and things that kind of make you think incorrectly, because that's what can force you to make mistakes. So really the skill I try and develop every day, and I'll be working on this skill for the rest of my life, is trying to just be more rational, more realistic, and just look at the world, understand how it actually works. And then for me, my work, I have to take a proposal and decide whether to put money into it or not. And so assessing risk and all those things all start from the basis of taking a rational view of the world.
Yeah. And that be, you said that within your professional capacity. What about in your personal capacity?
I'd say being more empathetic and being more in line with how other people are feeling and thinking. I wouldn't say that's something I'm a rank beginner at. My wife's very good at it. I'm not. So there'll be many situations where I'm kind of trying to grapple with a problem with somebody else, not quite sure how. And really, I just haven't understood their point of view very well. So that's something I do try my best to keep working on. Yeah,
walking in someone else's issues for a moment and understanding. Yeah. So you mentioned your wife there. So I know your wife. You're from school as well. So you as a man and her as the lady you decide to marry and spend your life with. How do you think being married to her makes you the man you are today?
Yeah, I mean, in our case, I was very lucky. I met her, and 3 hours later, I asked her to marry me.
Wow!
So it was, I know a good deal when I see one. So yeah, I mean, it was just, we got on so well. We were like best friends, and so I realized straight away she had lots of qualities that I lacked, and she was better than me in pretty much every way. So I thought, I've got to, this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. I just knew that straight away.
Yeah.
So in terms of how she makes me a better person, it's, I admire her. I kind of, when we're talking and she has ideas, or the way she runs the house and looks after the kids and does her work, and the way we get on as a couple, it's great to be a part of that. Yes, I'm very grateful I've met her.
Mm. And, that's relationship is one thing, but what does self-love mean to you?
I think it means accepting you for who you are. I think that's very important. I think I had some trouble with that. I was going out into the world, I didn't really know who I trying to turn myself to something else because I saw an entrepreneur and I thought I admire that person, so I want to be more like them. But as you get older, you start to realize that you got to appreciate your own temperament. You just kind of you're wired in a certain way. We're all wired in different ways. Some are extroverts, some are more introvert. And so it took me a while to just appreciate those qualities in myself that actually I realized I don't need to change them. I can turn them into advantages. So in my case, I would say I've got I get on well with people. But then at the same time, I had to develop more my rational thinking side. So I worked on that quite a bit. So then I have a competitive advantage because a lot of people who are good at working with people aren't spreadsheet types. And the spreadsheet types can't get on with people. So I've kind of got both. I try to work on both of those.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they're the kind of things I've done. Yeah.
Yeah. And, for you in your life, obviously you have to be a certain way with not just people around you, but with yourself in order for things to happen. What kind of habits do you have that serve you maybe on a daily basis or on a weekly basis that make you the version of yourself that we see in front of you today?
I don't know.
Is there any habits that you have that serve you that you think, yeah, I like what I do there and I do automatically?
I don't know, I guess I wonder if it's a habit or just it's something that I was born with. I mean, it's very difficult to say. In terms of habits, I mean, same as you. I mean, I get up early. I get on with what I need to do. I suppose one habit I try and cultivate is doing the things I don't want to do. There's lots of things. I'm sure we've all got tasks, that we just put off for ages because we don't want to do them. But often they're the ones that just need to get done, right? So I try to force myself to do those. And I think just rewarding yourself in little ways for doing those sorts of things is important. Give yourself a biscuit or a cycle ride or something really dumb. It works. It does work.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're the kind of habits. Keeping fit, I think, is important. If anything, just to get your mind clear and away from the work. Sometimes that can give you a bit of clarity. Eating well, I know you guys are into that as well. It's very important. I think forcing yourself to do things that you may take you out of your comfort zone. So I'm naturally an introvert, but I forced myself to go network. I ran networking meetings for a while. I've spoken to audiences of up to 1,000 people, stuff like that. So that was really difficult. And the way I got into that was I realized that skill was a rare skill that most people, there's surveys and people say rather die than speak in public and all that kind of thing, right?
That's right.
So I realized that was something that most people couldn't do very well. So the way I cultivated that was I started off, I joined Young Enterprise and Prince's Trust when I was quite young, about 21, 22. So they put me in front of young university students. And the great thing about that was most of them weren't listening to what you were saying anyway, because they just didn't care. So, they put me in front of this audience and out of about 100 people, 2 were listening, which is fine. And so, and it was great to have those 2 come up to me and give me feedback and everything else. So that was my kind of way of learning to do public speaking. So stuff like that, I think is important, because you've got to be a realist and you say, I don't really like public speaking. Okay, fine. But it matters. And it's an important skill to have because if you want to lead and get somewhere, it's important to be able to motivate others. And so you've got to find a way to learn that skill and just try and do it in such a way that it's fun and, you kind of ease yourself into it. And that's what I did. Yeah.
And it's interesting you say about introvert because I would identify myself, in a previous life. I've always been more comfortable in my own company or in small companies, so individually with one-on-one people as opposed to large groups. So large groups always scared me. This is sort of the younger me. And I sort of try and default back to someone I knew or someone around me that I felt comfortable with. I think as we got older, as you become more comfortable with yourself and you become more, I think not just comfortable, but more confident within your abilities and you like the skin that you're in and you come out in the world because you're comfortable with who you are for your quirks and your strengths, right? I think I can, in those situations, I think I can switch between both. So I think I would call myself an ambivert more so, that sort of extrovert in certain situations when, especially family and things like that, where I feel really confident, and still very introverted when I sit by myself because I like my own company. I like self-isolating. I just don't like when someone tells me to do it. So that's my COVID political analysis right now. But ambivert, where I can switch between both, and I like having that, ability. And like you said, there are times when I need to be able to come out of my skin and enjoy myself, and likewise, there are times when I need to be on my own and be comfortable there. I've heard a saying where people would rather die than sit in a room with their own thoughts. Because, like they say, two people think, another 2% of people think they think, and another 96% would rather die than think. And that is quite an interesting analogy to me, because I see so much around that in terms of, where do you want your life to be? How do you want to shape it? How do you want to discipline? What do you need to do to make sure your life is like this in the next 5 years, if that's what you want it to be? And that's all based on decisions you make today, right? It's all on the things you decide today to say, this is how I want my life to be. Not just turn up in 5 years' time and say, my life is pretty shit because I thought it'd be like this, but you've done nothing to access the attention on all the details that are needed to be there. I know with energy, especially, we have a lot of energy around us. So we have people, we have relationships, we have money, we have, time, we have space, whatever these things are. Now, specifically sort of focusing on money, a lot of people are in a situation where this is not for anyone I know personally, but I know it's real, where people are one paycheck away from being homeless because they don't have the situation that we've cultivated, or the background or the foundation that our parents have given us to allow us to think in a certain way, right? So if someone's sort of in that situation, then they want to move themselves into a space where they are a little bit more not on the edge so much, especially with money, what kind of things have you done in the past that have helped you think in an investor mentality rather than consumer?
Well, I've worked really hard in my life to avoid situations like that in the first place. I know that's not much comfort to somebody who's in that place, but all I'm trying to say is prevention is better than cure sometimes. It's in very tough situations like that. Once you're in it, there's no easy answers. Because if there was, everybody who's in that situation would just apply that simple answer and get themselves out. So really the solution there is not to get yourself in that place in the first place. And if you are, then I'm sure there's plenty of, you need to go and find the appropriate help, various charities and things like that. Financial advisors and whatever else. But in my case, I've always been very fearful of ending up in a situation like that. So I've tried to, the key thing I suppose I've done is try to underspend my income all my life. And that's why I drive a 15-year-old car, or, I don't go on luxury holidays, even though I could. I buy my clothes from Costco. I don't care, because the satisfaction of living well within my means much more to me than what somebody else thinks about the car that I drive.
Yeah.
So that's been my way of kind of dealing with that. And even if I was, earning a lot less, I would just bring my expenses down to a point where I could, if I had to eat dal and roti every day for a week, I would. It's no big deal. I mean, your parents did the same, so did I.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing. This situation is kind of, I've seen in my experience with people I know who are starting to appreciate that life can actually be a lot simpler. They don't need to have a lot of the expenses and the cars and the things that they used to kind of spend money on. So I think a lot of people will strip away expenses that they thought they needed to have, but now don't. And that's a good thing, I think.
Yeah. I think the analogy that came to mind when you were just going through that is, your opinion of yourself is higher than anyone's opinion of you. So therefore, you're not going to be shaken by your environment and the noise outside, because if it serves you, then you will carry on that way. And if it doesn't, irrespective of what anyone thinks or says, you know what's good for you and you know what your truth is for the people around you, right? So I think and that comes from the investment you've made in yourself, whether that be, financially, from time, from the experiences, from your parents, from your background, from your foundation, that allow you to have that level of thinking and have that, unshakable belief in yourself to then allow you to live the life that is going to serve you today and for the rest of your life, because it is an investor mentality, right? It's what you do today to make sure you have a good life tomorrow, not just today, but tomorrow as well, right?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one, because I don't know if everybody has that temperament, or whether it can be developed easily. For me, it wasn't there when I was young. It changed when I had a family and all of that, and I had responsibilities, and I had to think of the future. And I suppose, things changed for me over time, and I started to think about much further down the line. And so, I think your perspective changes as you get older. But certainly when you're young, you're not thinking about the day when you're going to retire. I don't blame young people for not thinking like that. I mean, why should you think like an old man when you're 20? Enjoy your life a little bit.
It's like a couple of friends of mine have told me. So I set up a pension for both my kids about 4 years ago, just to put something aside, like £50 a month or something, just to put it aside in. And they're like, "You're so depressing. Why would you do that? Retirement in pensions can be like 60 years down the line." I said, "But what you don't understand is the way I'm thinking. You're thinking in your eyes. What I'm thinking is that, first of all, if I do this now and I only put a little bit aside, first of all, it will just grow into sort of quite a nice sum by the end. But secondly is when they start working, I want them to start paying that themselves. So they have the mentality of putting something aside. Even though our parents used to say to us, I never did it. And then when it may have been too late, I started thinking about it. So I thought I want them to have that little bit. So if you earn some money, put 10% or whatever it is, 20% aside and put it away for that time. Right? And if you have that mentality the whole time, your whole life, it adds up, doesn't it? It's that cumulative effect of compounding, right? And it'll add up. They don't understand why they're doing it. I just say, if you just do it, you'll see in 40 years that, Dad, thanks for doing that, because now I can see what the benefit of that is, right?
It's a very unnatural way of thinking, compound interest, because it's something, the exponential nature of things is very difficult for the human brain to comprehend. It's like the COVID situation we're going through now, and the way things can double every 2-3 days. It's just very difficult to see that, you can go from very little to a huge amount in a very short space of time. Take the nature of compound interest. When I really started to learn about the power of compound investing was when I came across a guy called Warren Buffett, who I greatly admire. I've kind of modeled myself around. And so I remember doing the calculation. If you take $10,000 or pounds, say pounds, and you invest that for 60 years, you just give it to someone like Warren, for example, and then you give it to somebody else, and Warren earns 20% on that money every year, and somebody else earns 10% on that money every year. The guy who took your 10 grand and earned 10% on it every year for 60 years will give you back 3 million after 60 years. Not bad, right?
Yeah.
10,000 to 3 million, right? The Warren Buffett, who can invest it at 20%, will give you back 563 million. So it kind of made me realize, I just need to find Warren Buffett type situations, And that's what I've been doing ever since I kind of, started kind of really getting serious about this. Was how can I grow my money at well, when you're small, you can grow it at thousands of %, right? Yeah. As you get to his scale, it changes. But so that's what I try and do every day, is try and find ways in which I can take a small amount of money and just keep growing it gradually. It doesn't excite many people. Most people think that's pretty boring. Why would you do that? But it's one of the few ways in which you can guarantee to get rich. As long as you don't lose, that's the key. As long as you don't do stupid things and lose a whole chunk of it, which puts you back, and it's very difficult to get back. Most people, don't realize if you have 10 grand and you lose, and you make a bad investment, you lose 50% of it. So you're 50% down 1 year, which means you go from 10,000 to 5,000. To get back to 10,000, you've got to make 100%.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's just to get back to where you started, never mind, any growth.
And still.
So a lot of my time is spent thinking about not losing money rather than making it. So I'm always thinking about risk and what can go wrong, and trying to mitigate those things. And then obviously you're trying to let the good things take care of themselves. And that's really the way I try and do things. But sure, compound interest is an amazing thing, and that's something I'd recommend a lot of you. Anyone listening to this is go and find a compound interest calculator and have a play for yourself, and you'll see the magic of it. It's incredible.
And I've always, money was obviously one of the energies we talked about just now in terms of compounding, but any energy form that we have around us is exactly the same, right? So relationships, we invest in them small bits at a time, multiply over time. Same thing with our own time. If we feel you don't have enough time, take little pockets of time out, and you'll see that start growing, and then you'll start using your time the way you want to use it, not the way that society is pulling you to use it. So everything compounded, there's a huge benefit, but it's understanding that it's going to take time. I need patience, I need discipline, I need focus to make all this happen. And that skill set is like, if I asked you a question, what is your superpower? What would you answer to that?
So superpower, what you define that as something that you can do well that other people can't, I guess?
Yeah. So for example, I've always defined my superpower as patience. So I have a lot of patience with a lot of situations. I know things are going to take time. And I wish I could train that more in younger people that I meet, especially 18 to 21-year-olds, to say, we underestimate what we can do over a long time and overestimate what we can do in a short time. If we always have that thing that things are going to take time, just keep doing things slowly and eventually something will happen rather than panicking and trying to get it all done in one go, everything happens in life. And I've seen that. You put a 20-year plan together and you put a 1-year plan together. 20-year plan will always happen if you just stick at it. The 1-year plan may do, depending on life, right? So patience has been built into me because there was such a time in my life when I was so impatient all the time that it never served me and it broke me at one point. And therefore, I had to learn and the universe taught me. So now that is a skill that I think for me, it's not just the patience about doing things, but it's being around people and being patient with people. And the empathy thing, like you're saying, you need patience to have empathy, right? Because sometimes some situations, they don't compute in my head. I see someone living their life in a certain way, and I think that just doesn't make sense to me. It's alien. But if I was born in their shoes and I walked every day in their shoes, I would be doing exactly the same thing because that's the journey that they're on. I'm not on that journey, thankfully, and that's what I've had to learn. So if that being my superpower, what would you think yours would be?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose for me, I've developed over time is knowing what I'm good at and sticking to that. I think that's I think where people make mistakes is they go and they think they're good at something which they're not. And the way I define that is knowing the risks again. So a lot of people come into my business and think, well, that seems simple enough. I take this much money, I borrow that much money and do this and develop this thing, and then COVID hits and the whole thing falls apart, and then they end up in a lot of trouble. And then people like me come and buy it off and do stuff like that. So whereas I've been, really cautious. And so why have I been so cautious? Because there were lots of things offered to me which seemed very attractive. But I was able to say, honestly, I don't understand this. And what I mean by that is I don't understand what can go wrong. Yeah. If I don't know that, I shouldn't be playing in that. Let somebody else do that. And if they make a lot of money, good luck to them.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's something I do differently to other people that I've seen.
Yeah. And that again comes down to knowing yourself, doesn't it? It's because you invested the time in yourself and seeing what parts of you work and where you think and where your brain is as a person. You've then played on that strength to say, actually, I identify that and I know that works well with me. And that comes back to, I think, really spending time with yourself and really spending time to try and do things that help you as a person, not just in an environment around other people, but by yourself. How much time do you spend by yourself? How much time do you invest in yourself to be the best version of yourself? Not for you, but for all the people around you. Because if you're shining your light bright, the other people around them can shine their light bright because they have you to draw upon, right? It's that analogy of the candle. You can light someone else's candle. It doesn't mean your candle's going to go any dimmer. It just means you're lighting other people around you, right? And I've always seen that in terms of if I can live my life in a certain way and I can, if people can draw upon that strength, that energy, or if I can give them guidance and support, that not only comes back to me because when I need them, they can help me as well. But when you give out that energy of help and of love or support, it'll always come back to you in some way in terms of how you feel because you've done that and you've been able to do that, right?
Yeah, I agree. For me, this is it. I mean, it's reading, it's learning, it's being intensely curious about the world. And so that's where I think my advantage is. I mean, I'm not, any spare time that I've got, I'm reading, listening, trying to improve myself in some way. And it's not just in self-improvement, the classic kind of Tony Robbins type rah-rah stuff. I mean, that's one thing. But for me, it's like learning, taking my mind and making it having a much broader mental models in my head. So, if I'm looking at a situation, it's not just saying, how do I use my economics background or my finance background? How do I use history to help explain, what sort of examples can I take from that? What about maths? What about engineering? So the classic engineering concept I use every single time I do a deal is when you build a bridge in engineering, you build it so that if it's built to take, if the maximum you're allowing on that bridge is 20,000 tons, at any one time, you build it so it can handle 50,000 just in case, right? You have a margin of safety.
Yeah.
And so in my, when I'm doing a deal, I want a margin of safety. If I don't get that, I walk away. And so, these kind of concepts I've taken from lots of different places. Psychology is so important. I think if you want to learn something, if you're watching this, first thing I would start with psychology, because that's how that's how people work.
Yeah.
And so many times I've used that. I'll give you an example. I remember raising money for a deal, and I had these 6 people there, and the classic sort of thinking would be, I need to convince all 6 people to invest in this deal, because that's how you raise investment, right? But my psychological knowledge taught me that most people follow other people. There's a principle called social proof. Yeah. People tend to look around at others and see to kind of figure out what they should do.
Yeah.
So by kind of having that knowledge, I started to think, well, actually, there's only 1 or 2 people in that group who are kind of respected, the ones that the others I know will look up to. So I only had to convince 1 person, not 6, because as long as I convinced that person, I knew. And that was just a theory that I had going in. Because I was kind of fooling around. I thought, let's just see what happens. With fooling around with the investment, fooling around with this idea of how do I build this, community of investors. And it's exactly how it happened. I rang up that particular person, or 2 people, before the day that I had this kind of committee meeting. And they were like, yeah, great, love it. Spent a bit more time with them, so that when the kind of sheets were given out around this table, the 2 that everybody else looked up just started just filling it out. And I saw everybody else, before they filled theirs, look up to see what the other person was doing. And he and she were filling it out, so they just filled it out. And I remember one guy, it's funny, he actually called me the next day and said, can you explain this whole thing? Because I don't know really what I signed up for, And I had to kind of run it through with him. And so having that knowledge of these sort of principles from different, having these different models in your head is really important. And that comes from reading. If you don't have the books, it doesn't matter, because you can call me or Bavik or go to a library. We'll lend you our books. There's no problem. People who love reading and learning love to share with other people who are also the same mindset.
And I think the key word you said there is curiosity, having a curious mind. Doesn't mean that you necessarily enjoy or like it. I've listened to stuff which it's just, I have no interest in, but I thought, let me just listen to it. I think I listened to one on this gardening, about a plant that they were gardening and they were growing in the Amazon somewhere. I thought maybe one day that might come in handy, so let me just listen to this. And it was quite interesting. Whether I'm going to use it or not ever, but it's just that curious mind that makes me think, I know I have no real interest in this, but why not? If I can learn one thing from it that I would never have learned, then it's been worth it, right? And also that analogy which always sits in my mind is like, there's so much we know. So there's so much you know, right? There's so much you know you don't know. So there's so much there's still to go. But then the really interesting thing is the things you don't know. So that's the other 96% of all the things, you open a door you never knew that existed. It's like someone told me, a friend of mine, he plays cricket, sort of semi-professional, and he strokes a bat in a certain way. And one of the guys that came to see him, he goes, did you know that the way you stroke your bat, if you ever gave up cricket, you could paint the underneath of submarines, because that's exactly the same stroke they use. And he was like, first of all, I didn't know they painted the bottom of submarines. And secondly, I didn't realize I had the skill to do that. And that is something you don't know until it's opened up to you. But it's only when you have a curious mind that you realize that most of the world is this. It's like when they say the universe, we talk about us as humans being curious about the universe, about not just our world, but the whole world around us. And we are so brave in thinking that we understand the universe, right? And someone put the analogy to me, they said, if you sat in the mid, if you've never seen anything in your life, so you had no vision, and then someone sat you in the middle of Abbey Park, put a chair down, and you opened your eyes and you could see. And you saw everything around you. So you saw the grass, you saw the trees, etc. And they said, now, from this, explain to me what the whole world looks like. And you can't, because you don't see it, right? But we as human beings believe that just from this little minuscule viewpoint we have of the universe, we understand the whole thing. And we don't. And it's that's what excites me about all the things that are still, in our lifetime, we're never even going to touch close to what the possibilities of knowledge are, but there's so much always to learn. And that's what really frustrates me about certain people when they say I'm bored. Those two words I think should be banned from the English dictionary, English language, full stop. Because in this day and age, there is never a reason that anyone should use those two words together. I'm bored. Really say, I'm too lazy to use my brain, and that's why I want to use the two words of I'm bored. Because there is no time, especially with the amount of information, data, and the knowledge that's being shared these days, that those two words should come out of anyone's mouth. And I've got a big gripe with that. And if my kids ever say that, they know they get it from dad. So that shouldn't be said in my house. It's bad. And I think I should put a sign on my door. If you're going to say the words I'm bored, you might as well leave, because it is not possible in this day and age. Where do you think that viewpoint comes from, though?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, we're busy.
So can you imagine a time, Parmdeep, when you can never say you're bored?
But I think so.
Really?
but I quickly find something to do, right?
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying.
I think, yeah. I honestly haven't thought about that very much. I think it's just the case of when you're very busy, you've always got things on your mind and things that need doing. And I think, I think when you have children and you're married and you're busy and you're running a household and running a business, there's always things to get on with. And maybe I was different when I was just graduated from uni and didn't have very much time to do it, and important to do. So maybe then, but I think it's weird, isn't it? We live in a world now, like you said, where so much available to us. But maybe we're kind of at a point where there's almost too much. I mean, it's almost an overstimulation problem. People aren't sleeping properly because they're ending up watching Netflix till late at night. It's very difficult to absorb information simply because there's so much of it. So the skill now is not getting information, there's so much of it, it's how do you process it. That's the problem. So I think we live in a very overstimulated, very, very complex seeming world.
And I think that's a worry, especially for the younger generation, with the amount of information being bombarded on their undeveloped brains in terms of things that are out there, and their brains can process so much, but not the amount of stuff that's out there. And if they have everything at their fingertips and there's no curiosity and there's no going out and just working stuff out, at what point is life worth living when there's nothing really that you need to work out anymore? There's nothing left to learn, or there's no relationship left to build because you think you know everything already because Google will tell you. When we grew up very organically, right? We grew up with like 3 or 4 channels on the TV and the people around us, and that's it. Everything gets out, so we went out and learned, or we fell over and stood up again and learned that maybe I shouldn't walk like this, or maybe I shouldn't talk like that. Now, Google will tell you, don't walk like that, don't do this, and it's almost become like a security blanket, the phone, where, especially that generation find it, I'll hide behind this and press a few buttons so I don't need to talk to anyone. Like the art of communication, the art of conversation, I think is really going downhill, especially with my daughter who's 14, right? So we've had a little pact because she can fall into that hide behind the phone when there's a lot of people around. And I said, what about this? You're saving up for a new phone. What I'll do is I'll pay you £1 every minute you can ring someone and have a conversation with them. Anyone. I'll pick the person, you just ring them and just talk to them. Just build that skill, because that skill will serve you all your life. But hiding behind your phone and pressing buttons and messaging is not going to serve you all that. It will serve you to a purpose, will get something done. But to me, conversation, like holding a pen and writing, using calculator, work stuff out in your head numerically. I know this is really, really old school ways of thinking, but it served me so well all my life. And I want them to understand that it's still important, no matter what anyone tells you, that human interaction is still going to be important, and it's going to be important all your life, no matter what anyone tells you.
Good advice.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So now, Parmdeep, we're coming to the end of a conversation, and I love conversations like this because it just flows, and we can, the energy that's generated, the knowledge that passes through, hopefully always reaches the right people, and the right people hear what we've got to say. So as we get to sort of the end of your life, I know you're sort of a really strong, healthy guy, and you're going to live till nearly 200, and we're all good with that. Now, we've got towards the end of your days and you're on your last day, you're on your last, last few minutes, and you've got everyone around you, they're all sort of sitting by you and they're happy and you're ready to go on to your next journey. You don't have enough energy to speak, but you have enough energy to write three words that have served you, and three words that will hopefully, if other people practice, can serve them. What would those three words be for you?
3 words?
Yep. Or 3 analogies or 3 statements, whichever.
Integrity.
Uh-huh.
Patience, I think, something you've mentioned before.
Yep.
I agree with. And realism. As I said before, seeing the world as it really is and dealing with that.
Perfect. And all those things, like I understand about you, take time to develop, right? And it's a way of thinking, and it's a process which, when you invest in yourself and you see those things, it can serve you for a long, long time. It's not just something for the next few years. It's a lifetime skill, right?
Yeah, what I try to do, there's a guy called Ben Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the USA, and he's written an autobiography which I highly recommend reading. And one of the exercises he did as a 16-year-old was he just looked around and said, who do I admire? What qualities do they have? And he started writing down the qualities these people had, like integrity, they were hardworking, they were honest, they were loving, they were caring. And he wrote this list and realized there was nothing there that he could not attain for himself if he really wanted it. And on the other side, he thought, which people don't I like? Because they're failures in life, and what qualities do they have? Well, they're argumentative, they lie, they do whatever, they cheat, they all these things that you don't like about people. And you realize, if I've got any of those, I can get rid of those. It's not like I have to live with them. Yeah. And so he spent time, tracking those habits, and I did that. I don't do as much anymore, but because I'm just so busy. But it's something I think I will, after this conversation, go back to, and something I did review for a long time every week. It's just like, which habit am I working on this week? How have I gotten on? So the empathy, for example. I met someone. How did that go? Did I really think about things from their side? Okay, how do I improve that? And constantly working on that. And before you know it, one day you'll look back and think, oh my God, look how much I've improved. Because there'll come a day, you mentioned self-love, there'll come a day when you're the guy that you admire because you have those qualities. Yeah. And the first step is always awareness, isn't it? Being aware first, and doing that exercise makes you aware. And then from awareness, there can be action and movement to the direction you want to go, right? If you're not aware of it, you can't even work on it because you don't even know, right? Once you become aware of it, there's some actions, some skills, and then you start noticing it as well with people around you. And then it becomes, highlighted that this is something I need to work on. And this is another reason that I wanted to do this, is I see so much in myself when I watch back, and I think there's so many quirks that I'd like to work on, but putting myself in front of the camera, putting myself into situations like this, I can only improve and I can only get better because words have always been important to me. Words between people, conversations, because I believe that the words are, can be a way into the soul, way into the heart, where you can really touch people and you can move people and maybe help them a little bit on their journey, where they, make it a little bit lighter or a little bit happier just from hearing the words that we speak. So that was, again, another important thing for me. Right. Now, this podcast is called Bigger Than the Hustle, and right now you're bigger than the world. So I've sourced a microphone, and that microphone is connected to 7.58 billion people in this world. They're all listening. They can all hear you. There's no language barrier, and they're all awake. So if I gave you this mic for 30 seconds, what would be your message to the world? I'd say the golden rule: treat people how you want to be treated.
Perfect.
Perfect. Well, it would be a much better place if that was how we all went about our day.
And it's so simple, but you have to be reminded of it constantly, don't you? Because you can get so caught up in your world, and you realize that world is made up because of the way you've made it. And if you don't like something, it's in your control and your ability to change it. And that the way you change it, like you said, when you treat others like you would want to be treated, that's how you control yourself to then see the world that you want to see outside of yourself, right? Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, Parmdeep, thank you so much for your time. I know you're a really busy man. I know you live your life in a certain way, and I've always admired that, and I've openly said that to you in our conversation. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for turning up in the world that you do. I know there's still a lot more conversations we'll have, a lot of times out that we'll spend and talk. So if there's any time you ever need me, please call and please help. And likewise, I know you're always available should I need any help or support. So thank you for always being the person you have been.
Thank you for having me on, and good luck with your marathon.
Yeah, no worries at all. Thank you so much, Parmdeep. So this was Bigger Than Hustle. So a final message for everyone out there. Big energy leads to big thoughts. Big thoughts lead to big ideas. Big ideas lead to big actions. Big actions lead to a big life. So keep thinking big. Until next week, see you later. Bye-bye.
Only you. This is your one life, your one chance. People are going to talk about you anyway. You might as well live the life that you want to live.